Long story short, in 1448, Byzantine Emperor John VIII was succeeded by his brother Constantine XI. Over the next few years, Constantine's diplomatic efforts to gather allies failed. Another attempt at a union of the churches fell through in 1452, when in Constantinople, members of the Orthodox clergy declared they'd rather submit to Muslim rule than rejoin with the Church of Rome. The merchant republics of Venice and Genoa, with their trade dependent on Constantinople, were the only ones willing to grant support, conditioned on the emperor getting other European rulers to come to his aid, and on the emperor lowering the import-export taxes. But aid was not coming, and whatever was being prepared would be too late. The Byzantine court could no longer appease the Sultan, who had been planning and preparing this for years, building coastal forts to block off the straits. After almost a 2-month-long siege, Mehmed II conquered Constantinople in May of 1453. After the conquest, Mehmed moved his capital to Constantinople and laid claim to the Roman Empire. The papal call for a crusade to retake Constantinople didn't result in much, as most European princes had other problems. Sultan Mehmed II now prepared to follow up the conquest with a repeat of the 1439 and 1440 northern campaigns of his father, but this time with a reportedly bigger army. The first step would be to, again, take out the buffer state of Serbia. The despot of Serbia, George Branković, had become irregular in his tribute payments to the Sultan. He was also being treacherous, trying to secure protection from the King of Hungary through his powerful in-laws, and technically the 10-year truce agreed to before Varna was about to expire in 1454. After taking out Serbia, the Sultan's next step would be to secure a fortress on the Danube. Taking Belgrade would open the most direct and simplest route towards Buda along the Danube's banks. Just hearing rumors of the Ottoman advance sent the estates of the realm of St. Stephen into a panic. At the diet held in January of 1454, the estates were considering raising a general levy, emergency taxation, and even contemplated adopting some version of King Sigismund's old military reforms that the estates had opposed in his time. They would see the estates provide soldiers proportional to the number of their tenants, or pay proportional fines if they didn't provide any. Bishop Ivan Vites and other diplomats traveled across Europe seeking aid for the defense of the realm. In 1454, Ivan Vites addressed the Imperial Diet in Frankfurt, asking for 20,000 infantry and 10,000 cavalry. The Imperial Diet approved in principle, but delayed decision until consultations with Emperor Friedrich in 1455. At the same time, the princes of the empire were also being pestered by papal delegates like the fiery Franciscan friar Giovanni de Capistrano to commit to a crusade. But in late 1454, Janos Hunyadi came to Branković's rescue at Smederevo, halting the Ottoman advance and winning a victory against the Ottoman rearguard. This, of course, meant that Hunyadi the hero had stopped any and all future Ottoman invasions, so there was no need for that pesky general levy or the military reforms. So the Diet of the Realm in 1455 only adopted an emergency tax. Meanwhile, on the very domestic front, the relationship between the Hunyadi and the Celje dynasties was again on shaky ground. Ulrich of Celje fell out of royal favor in late 1453, resulting in Hunyadi breaking off the engagement between Elizabeth of Celje and his son Matthias. But when Ulrich was back in royal favor within a year, the marriage was back on. Branković was also likely pressuring his son-in-law to commit Hunyadi to protect Serbia. Young Elizabeth of Celje would die from an illness in late 1455. Ending the familial alliance. Ulrich had no other surviving children. The constitutional crisis with regards to Hunyadi withholding royal revenues and the Diet backing him against an absentee king also resolved in early 1456 when the king personally entered Buda, making the Diet very happy, and Hunyadi willingly relinquished some control over the royal estates. Hunyadi and the king also reconciled because in 1456 the Ottomans were again on the march northwards. And during this year, Halley's comet was passing the earth. It was a portent of either great fortune or great disaster. Hunyadi attempted to distract Mehmed II by supporting Vlad III Tepesh's claim to the Vlachian princedom. Vlad III overthrew the now Ottoman vassal Ladislav II, but Sultan Mehmed II would not be distracted. Meanwhile, a new Pope, Calixtus III, had continued his predecessor's efforts to mobilize a crusade. European princes didn't heed the call, but several years of monks and priests sounding the alarm did lead to several sizable zealous masses of knights and commoners to gather in places across Europe. One very large mass gathered around Vienna in the summer of 1456, at the same time as King Ladislav's army was gathering under him and Ulrich of Celje to reinforce the Ottoman border. But neither of those armies would see combat. On July 4th, 1456, the Ottoman army laid siege to Belgrade. Hunyadi was quick to reinforce Belgrade, as he had been overseeing and preparing the defense of the border for a while now, expecting the Ottomans at several possible crossings. The Franciscan friar Giovanni da Capistrano, who at the time found himself in southern Hungary, rallied the local zealous masses to arms and also came to the defense of Belgrade. The fortress held out the Ottoman onslaught until July 21st, when the Ottoman assault collapsed. The next day, the defenders sallied forth and forced the Ottoman army to retreat. On the 6th of August, word of the victory at Belgrade reached the Pope in Rome. He had already given orders that all church bells should call for prayers for the defenders every day at noon. But since news of the victory preceded the Pope's orders in many places, the noon ringing turned from calls for prayer to bells of celebration. The order was never rescinded. And to this day, the bells of many churches don't just ring out the 12 tones for noon. They also ring out in full celebration of a 600-year-old victory. The whole thing also likely stuck around because people liked that it was emphasized that it was indeed noon. Meanwhile, the army that defended Belgrade was exhausted, suffering from disease, and on the brink of revolt. So Hunyadi and Capistrano decided that it might be a good idea to carefully disband the army. On the 11th of August, 1456, Janos Hunyadi, perpetual hereditary Ispan of Bistrice, captain general of the realm of St. Stephen, fell dead from the plague. The defense of Belgrade cemented Hunyadi's heroic reputation. Brother Giovanni da Capistrano followed Hunyadi on the 23rd of October. Capistrano's body was buried at Ilok by Nicholas of Ilok and his family, who would benefit for a long while from taking care of the remains of a contemporary martyr. Despot George Branković of Serbia also died around Christmas in December of 1456 after taking back some of his lands from the Ottomans. Janos Hunyadi's eldest son Ladislav, a Ban of Dalmatia and Croatia, took over his father's command of Belgrade, and also effectively took over his father's possessions, holdings, offices, and revenues, some of which the king now wanted back. And it just so happened that the king was on his way towards Belgrade at the head of an army with a new captain general, Ulrich of Celje.